And welcome back to a special edition of A New Day celebrating women. It's International Women's Day. This year's theme, Break the Bias. Today we have with us Dr. Kris Rampersad, who is a journalist, author, educator, multimedia content producer, a publisher, and through her blog Democracy, Litscapes, Landscapes of Fiction from Trinidad and Tobago, and now her website, Global Knowledge Pot at www.krisrampersad.com, which is a resource guide for many of our activities. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Kimberly. Good morning, dear viewers.
So I know you also hold a national medal.
For the development of women, yes, in 2018, I was awarded the National Medal for the Development of Women. And the interesting thing about that is that I was the International Relations Director of the network of NGOs. And we had actually recommended as one of the initiatives way back then. It would have been around 2050, from 2012, somewhere around there, that women be recognized and awarded for their work. And that was one of the things we tabled that arose from a campaign I had conceptualized, and the network moved, and we had the Commonwealth Caribbean Women Agents of Change initiative. So that was one of the things that was tabled, and it resulted in the establishment of this national award for women. Among the first recipients were Hazel Brown, the coordinator of the network, Mrs. Zaliha Hassan Ali, and some others. And of course, when we're doing these things, you don't think that you would be one of these people who would eventually be one of the recipients. But it so happened that eventually I was recommended and was awarded this medal for the development of women. And that involved both my work in terms of development, public education, and public awareness initiative as a civil activist, as well as a journalist. I've been a journalist for, that is my substantive career. And the title of the medal was the Medal for the Development of Women / Journalism.
Now, you have also served at the level of UNESCO as president of its Education Commission, vice president of its program, External Relations Commission. Tell us a bit about this and how it ties into our cultural heritage, and even the work you have done with promoting cultural heritage from a female perspective.
Okay, and it's interesting that you bring that up. And if I would really like to focus, in fact, on when we talk about breaking the bias, and we have seen the gender movement is not a new movement. It's in the Americas, it sprung around at the turn of the 20th century. The action and activities and for recognition of an equal place for women in society is not new. And yet we see that the changes have been small and piecemeal and minuscule. Although now, we can boast of women enjoying substantive levels of education, at least in our society. And I have to say that when we talk about gender empowerment and bias, it's not a one size fits all, and it really has to be taken in the context of each society. And that's where the cultural elements come in, because I think part of, and in fact, a large degree of this, the slow pace of change has been because of the slow pace of change in the culture. And when I talk about culture, I talk about the culture of business, the culture of economics, the culture of politics, and those are not the things that we really address. We tend to go for the surface things, and not go behind to see how we can do that paradigm shift and aim for cultural shift. I think, and I am very, very optimistic, that one of the pros that has emerged out of the COVID-19 pandemic is that it has sort of loosened up many of these had stronghold cultural systems, the institutional cultures the institutions that will now be grappling into recovery. We have actually a very dynamic opportunity to now make some of those changes and not go back to the old normal. I am terrified that when people talk now about getting back to the normal, that we're going to slip back into the old normal. I think it offers us a tremendous opportunity to leverage some of the changes we have been advocating for decades, including breaking these barriers, breaking the biases, the discrimination which deprives us of all the talents and energy and vision and imagination that women can bring to the table. Um, so rather than going back into that old normal, that we can now forge ahead and institute some of the changes we want into the new normal and what I called into the post-pandemic planet. So I'm very optimistic about that. I think we need to take a very, very close look at the institutional cultures. I see you just had the WPC there doing tremendous work in terms of the changes within the police system. And certainly that is one of the authority system. And as we know, traditionally, one of the stronghold of male power, right? So these I think this is the kind of close look we need to take at our institutions and how those institutions are replicating that old culture, the dominant male culture, the patriarchal culture, the culture of entitlement and privileging that negates the talents and experience and imagination and energies of what women can bring to the table.
Well, Dr. Rampersad, you talk about this women and freedom in our region, free to pursue their careers and education. What are some of the pressuring issues involving breaking the bias for Caribbean women that even evolved?
Okay, I would give two. As I said, one size doesn't fit all. The demographics on education for Trinidad and Tobago is very different from the demographics for education in other parts of the region. For Guyana, for example. So whereas we have had in Trinidad and Tobago opportunities, and there were opportunities, primary, secondary school education, tertiary education, and in fact, our education demographics show that women have been achieving high, in fact, in terms of the numbers across the spheres, both in the science and the arts, are higher than male, to the point now where there is this new advocacy movement about male underachievement and what the social and cultural factors that have been contributing to that. Having said that, I don't want to go off into the line of male marginalization. That's just a subject for another time. But even though our women have been high achievers in the education system, and this is something I have been placing on the table with that I really think needs to we need to put more focus, because this is going to be a problem that will be surfacing for all other countries and all the other cultures where efforts are being made to bring women's education and women in all the other sectors on par. So let me get back to Trinidad and Tobago. So although we have women who are very high achievers and are exceeding in terms of the statistics at the universities across the spheres, in the sciences, in the arts, when it comes to occupying power positions and senior positions and positions of authority in other social sectors, we are not seeing that playing off. So much of the fight still remains in terms of equal pay for equal work, recognition in terms of promotions within organizations, and the kind of battles that take place through that process to be recognized for senior and authoritative positions. So, and then when we come to that, when we come to that, even though we have women placed in high positions, and we've seen, I did the first book on the first female prime minister, Kamala Prasad Pisa. So we had a woman prime minister that kind of sets the pace to now for any woman to occupy that position. We've had the first female president, which of course now opens up that space for other women to occupy that position. We still, and those are in terms of the highest political offices in the land. We have women in at high levels in industry, in the education sphere, and what have you. The challenge now is, how can these women make these spaces work for other women to advance the quest for equality, to help us in our quest to eliminate the biases? And I think that conversation is not being had to the degree that it should be. If we don't, I think if we don't table that, and if we don't consistently pursue that, the entire effort of the gender movement, not only in our little Caribbean island or in the Caribbean or in the region, but across the world, is going to reach that point where we are, where there's still a cry of disempowerment, there's still a cry of discrimination and bias, although we have shown that we could take up the challenge in education and meet men on equal terms, take up the challenge in politics and meet men in equal terms. So there's so much to be done, and I would keep saying, in terms of making that paradigm shift and changing the culture of our institutions, the culture of politics, the culture of commerce, the culture in education, so that we can really get some meaningful change on the way forward.
Dr. Rampersad, switching from office to home, do you think we have evolved as a society in breaking the bias in our stereotypes for mothers and daughters, their gender roles at home and the workplace?
From the work.
Okay, interesting topic. As you know, I just lost my mom. We went through a period where, luckily for me, as you know, I've been traveling, and a long period I didn't spend much time with her. So COVID actually allowed me the opportunity to spend some time with her. She's been declining in health until her eventual demise. And for me, that was such an eye-opening experience. I think I thank COVID for allowing me that opportunity, because I discovered this woman I did not know. Strength, her power, her wit. She was quick. You couldn't win an argument with her. So sometimes I say, okay, and now I know where I got it from. And her biggest regret in her life, at nights I would be tucking her to sleep, and in fact that would kind of remind her of a mother she never really knew. Her mother died when she was 8, and she died at 91. So for 83 years of her life, every time she was going to bed, she missed her mother. I don't know what that would say for me. But having said that too, what her biggest regret in her life had been that she was never allowed to go to school. And I think from this woman I discovered in the last few years of her life, my mother, what she could have been if she had been offered that opportunity to go to school. Of course, she didn't sit with that regret. She leveraged that regret and made sure that all her children and all her daughters had an education. And in fact, that is the inspiration in the little what I call the biopic multimedia micro epic, which is a new creative genre I developed and launched last year at International Women's Day at the International Commonwealth Scholars Forum. That was a springboard on which I did that little biopic called One Night to Bloom, which is this memory of my mother giving me 50 cents to travel to go to school. Which of course changed my whole future, and she made sure that all of her children were educated, although she didn't, and it was because she didn't have that opportunity. And I think that is an example of what we can do when we open up those spaces for our girls. That would be the difference. That would make the difference here, as it is done for me, and it would make a difference across the region. So, as I was saying, that was a springboard on which I created the little biopic I did on myself called One Night to Bloom, of how that singular moment inspired my entire life and all the other things I've done since. So there is what changing the life of one woman can do for a society.
Now, Dr. Rampersad, I know, please accept my condolences. I know the passing of your mom was something very recent to you. And I'm so happy you are able to share it with us, your experiences with her. And I have seen how it has even shaped your writings. Because I follow your blog, I follow your writings. They have taken a different perspective on just being passionate about education and being woman. Your mom has spurned this, and she has given us the blessed gifts of yourself and your other sister, Dr. Indira Rampersad, as well. So we say a heartfelt thanks to her for what she has done. She has given Trinidad and Tobago much gifts, and the global community that you express these things to.
Well, actually, she had 7 daughters, right? 4 sons and 7 daughters. So it's not just me and Indira, who we all know in the public light. My other sisters, who are in their own spheres, have been contributing. Leela, who is a teacher, a retired teacher. So look at how many of us have actually gone back into education and education in our own spheres. In addition to which, her grandchildren, she's passed that on through her children to her grandchildren. And my nephew Saya, she topped the SCA a couple years ago. My other nephew just graduated from university and are doing very well in their spheres as well. So that is what the education impulse from one woman, and that ambition that she instilled in us, education can change the sphere for all of us. So that is what I think I have to thank my mom for. As I said, getting to know her so closely and so intimately when at a time when she's going on an age, all the frills have come off, all the frills, all the things that probably she would hide from you, the pretense that, and all that I saw was the strength and the determination and the courage and the wit. She had a sharp retort for everything. She turned everything into a song. So she was creating her own song. And in fact, I started also building our family tree from some of the songs she was singing that filled in gaps for me in tracing our family history. So that is what resides, if we had to get back to the discussion on culture and cultural change. Those are the little things that are embedded in culture. And when we learn that, when we understand, and that's what my work across the region has been, when we learn to dissect the cultural elements and what resides and what is transmitted, then from that seed is where we can inject change. If we look in terms of trying to isolate the negatives out of that, and preserving the positive elements through which we can create change. We call it, through the UNESCO system, in the intangible cultural elements, which are those cultural elements that you cannot see, feel, touch. It exists, but it isn't in the formal structured form as the World Heritage elements. For instance, it's those intangible things like how we just cook, talk, look, walk. Those things are where reside the essence of change. And if I might give some example, for instance, I was instrumental in terms, as you might know, reggae, for instance, recently made we got it into the register, the UNESCO register of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Jamaica had been trying for more than a decade to get reggae on this international list. And because of the main purpose of UNESCO has been really to strengthen the community level where people can take charge of their culture and leverage that against any kind of other threats. Okay? But because of, our Caribbean society, because of the contentions, and many of those contentions are inherited from the colonial system, yes, okay. But then of course they have different groups jostling for each other, and then the lack of respect for authority because of the slave system. So there were many little internal factors that if you didn't understand the Caribbean, you couldn't have really troubleshoot. And if you're living in the society, you're too close to it to be able to, to make a difference. So working with that community with an understanding of the Caribbean society through culture, we were able to troubleshoot through some of those issues and get them to build the community systems that would ensure that would satisfy when we make the assessments in our committee that they can take care of that culture. So that's what I mean when I talk about cultural change. I don't think it's an element we've leveraged enough until for the gender movement to understand that if we want to make meaningful change, we have to go directly at the culture. We can't just brush over and say, look at the numbers. We have women in industry. Many women are leaders of their own companies and empires and what have you. We have women at the top of the high achieving in education, but we still haven't done the shift. We haven't broken the bias. We haven't eliminated the discrimination. We still, by and large, are like in many respects considered second degree citizens. So there is a lot of groundwork to do. You might have heard me previously to also talk about embedded in the Constitution, for instance, and this is not a new fight. This has been on the table for decades. We need to change the language of the Constitution that recognize men and institutions, and men and institutions are men and patriarchal institutions, right? Or we need to change the language and from language spring change, spring cultural change. That's something the people who make policy and all of that don't quite understand. So that's part of what we do when we talk about education, educating policymakers. That is one of the change that is very, very essential for us to make. If we have to really reap the benefits of the work we have done and put in more and more women in parliament, put in a woman president, having a female prime minister. Cultural change is what we need to push for effectively benefiting from these strides that we've made in the women's movement.
I like how you say that, we need to build on the strengths of our female ancestors,
Indeed. We really do.
carrying on
Yes.
these traditions, tapping into it.
Can I also say something that we have heard? I don't know how closely you follow the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, for instance. And on her platform, she has been very consistently, it has been in the context of reparations largely, but she has constantly been
Embracing
projecting, and
heritage.
I don't think a message has really carried through that, we are where we are because of what colonialism did to us. And colonialism fractured our societies in so many ways. The racism it propagated, even the education system, the sense of inferiority that we have been inculcated in. How we talk is bad. How we walk is bad. How we eat is bad. What we eat is bad. And we are collectively accumulated this sense of inferiority. So we must wear jackets and suits in a very hot climate. Which I resent tremendously. If we are and if we are to listen to her message, uh, breaking to get to the bottom of what colonialism has done to our societies, what it has done to us as a people, and I in the end I think it all comes down to that, to how we as individuals process those experiences and what we emerges out of that. And we have tremendous examples in the region. Mia Motley is Miss Motley is one of those of people who have treated with those identity issues, whatever the inferiority issues, and she can hold her own in the sphere. She has an equal place on the table. That wouldn't have come overnight. Um, People might make some snide remarks about, she probably has more testosterone than most of the testosterone around the table. Um, her physical gait, so she can hold her own as a woman, but she has not lost the femininity, and she has not lost the sensitivity that comes with putting women in a position to address pertinent social issues. And I think she's a prime example of what women can achieve um, if they are instilled with the confidence, if we negate all those negative the colonial mentality, the colonial inheritance that we have. There have been many positives about colonialism as well. I mean, the fact that I think one of the things I boast of, for instance, is look at our multicultural society. We have access to each other's cultures in a way many other societies don't have. Right? There are
Yes.
negatives too, and we need to find a way to break those.
Prime Minister Mia is indeed a powerhouse, and we have so many ladies we can learn from. We want to thank you, Dr. Rampersad, for sharing with us your experiences. Thank you so much, and have a happy Women's Day.
And thank you for the opportunity, and same to you. Happy International Women's Day to you both.
Same to you, Dr.
And your
Rampersad.
We'll take a short break. Stay with us as we continue this special day in celebrating the strides of our ladies. You are watching MCtv.